During some slippery conversation with poor Nessa and High Wizard turned Ostrich Panlord, our player party, the Fallen's Fellowship, sloppily affirmed that the desert's delirium and Gnolki's reignited antisocial traits are events entirely unrelated. The party stammered through outing themselves as survivors of Zombiu that happened to know Nessa's husband Norik only in passing. You all further revealing to them that Zombiu leadership was poisoning the water and turning people different hues of insane or hostile. With that heavy-hitting, thankfully only mildly disastrous conversation out of the way, you all otherwise, along with Panlor, got back to strategizing the task at hand, debating between two paths of strategy. Option 1 involves seeking help from Kira Savu's Grand Chancellor, Osiris Pakir, but this risks involving authorities and jeopardizing Nolki's future with a criminal record, something Panlor wishes to avoid. Not to mention, Osiris's unfavorable opinion of Panlora, who supported the incumbent Mariah Shredguard in the last Chancellor elections against him. However, collaborating with the local government seems to Panlor the safest route with minimal risk of harm to all parties. Then there's option 2, which entails traveling to the Condoro jungle, where Panlor has a secret base with a stash of magic items that could offer better protection, with a goal to charge into Nolki's domain themselves and help Panlor to convince Nolki to put an end to the hostility between them and talk it out. But this option carries risks due to uncertainty of Nolki's arsenal, including access to Panlor's rare magical goods and those pesky polymorphed mercenaries. It's a long hike to reach the magic item base, of which Panlor can't bypass the trial, as it requires his handprint, which is just a mess of feathers now. Therefore, the player party will have to attempt the trial themselves. Despite the uncertainties, the Fallen's Fellowship deemed this the most suitable option, and embarked on the journey alongside their temporary party, Ostrich. During the long travels, the Fallen's Fellowship along with the Yappy Birdmen had plentiful escapades through the desert to reach the jungle. But most notably, the journey was marred by the unexpectedly fast return of their dreams being haunted, once again by the influence of the Greater Mother, Zuggtmoy. We start with Gribble, who dreamed, as he often does, of being a soaring mighty dragon in the sky. A shining sparkle caught his eye in the distance, and he nosedived for it. Realizing too late that the source of the captivating sparkle was no brilliant jewel or treasure, but the edge of broken glass, that which led down to a dark abyss. He could not pull back in time as he collapsed down into the nothingness, returning to his goblin form while shouting frantically in dissent. Meanwhile, Lux tranced fantasies of extending her conversation with her dear father in oblivion, trying to practice and rehearse how their next meeting will go. Noldorix kindly swept the hair from the side of Lux's face as he stared into her glistening violet eyes that resonated the same as his. He took a deep breath.
Please, Luthien, I need you to tell me what happened to your mother and our baby. What happened? I must know.
But Lux recoiled from his touch, averted her gaze a moment, apologizing that she was not ready to talk about what happened yet. She then became startled as Noldorix grabbed her wrists and shook her attention back onto him. His eyes turned black now as blood drained from the sockets. He forcefully demanded she tell him the fucking truth. Lux anxiously tried to fast pull away, but he lurched over her smaller frame like a beast, their shared weight on the ground causing the glass surface to crack and split. A black pit ahead and nowhere else to run. Lux tried kicking and crawling herself away from her father, but the split widened, causing her to collapse into the uncanny darkness, thankfully away from his prying interrogation that continues to stab her with guilt. Then Thotham, our proudly titled bear killer folk hero from Thaldorn. His dream consisted of a brutal match between himself and the half-orc Dazir, who rode on one of the mercenary-turned-combat bears. Swing after swing with his mighty hammer, Thotham sunk hits in like a pro, managing to knock Dazir down and out of commission, now leaving just himself and the bear to face off. But this measly black bear began to morph into the very bear Thotham faced years ago. A core source of his misery and anguish as it grew to a massive towering size, its fur damp and the smell of must stinging Thotham's nostrils. His measured fighting style turned into a blind rage as Thotham charged for this once feared demonic bear of the north, pounding his fist into it wherever he could solidly strike it. And as he victoriously pinned it down once more and beat its skull into the ground, he wiped the sweat from his tired eyes before realizing the corpse he just grappled and flung his fists into was now revealed to be the body of his dearest friend, Kaguya forever enduring Ogulukate. Her sad limp form pummeled into bloody shreds underneath him. Her blood stained Thotham's shaking fists as he stared at her half-burned face. The very woman and comrade who was the catalyst that helped free him from the chains he, for so long, didn't know were there. Thotham nervously reached his hand to stabilize the dying. despite fully knowing she was already long dead. Even in his dreams, Thotham failed to protect her. The icy area surrounding them both caved in and sent Thotham free, falling back into the darkness. A younger Mymeth sat at Marantavia's kitchen table in her old home, finishing her plate of breakfast as her father, Kriv, stood up and heartily stretched, thanking Marantavia for the food before declaring he needed to set out for the big monster raid. Mimith reached up to catch the corner of her father's sleeve. Eyes wide, she meekly pleaded for him to please not go. Marantavia's gaze saddened, knowing Mimith's concern was not misplaced. Kriv knew this too, but he bent down to confidently beam a smile at her as he pat Mimith's head.
Don't worry, kiddo. Just a few more years more of this bullshit, and I'll be able to retire young and early. Then we can enjoy all the time together we want. We can travel the lands and have adventures of our own together. It sucks for now, and I'm gonna miss you a shit ton, but chin up, Raider. Better days are ahead of us. Look forward to it, and be good for Mrs. Piddlesquire in the meantime. All right?
Mimith looked downward anxiously as Kriv kissed her head and made his way to the door. The bit of sleeve Mimith still held, pulled out from between her little fingers, as Kriv threw on his jacket from the MRP, waved them off, and left for the hunt. Little Mimith skittered to the window to watch her father depart, and just as he was almost out of sight, the massive Queen Remoraz eclipsed the sunlight and shadowed over him. Its claws wielded outward, and with a single swipe, shredded his strong form into the snowy grounds, painting the scene red. The colossal monster's menacing roar shook the entire house as cups and pictures alike fell from the walls and cabinets, and the house collapsed in itself as Marantavia ran to hold and protect Mimith. But the young dragonborn slipped through the sweet Harengon's fingertips as Mimith fell back into the darkness. Lastly, Tartholomew, a bizarre dream for a bizarre Harengon. This druid took on two animal forms simultaneously, his consciousness split between both a deer and a panther, the latter stalking and hunting the former. It would have been an interesting self-inflicted psychological experiment, if not for the condescending cackles of Baba Yaga coming from the tree towering above the prey deer, her still taking on the form of a snake-like branch with her face appearing in the knot of the wood.
Well, well, you really are fucked up in the head, aren't you, boy? Was that Zugtmoy's doing? She should have been more careful with you, but don't worry, Tarth. No judgment from me. Please continue. I look forward to the part where you kill yourself. I only wish I brought snacks.
Tarth, in both of his animal forms, ended up sighing annoyed, proclaiming Baba Yaga rudely ruined his inner philosophical test. Now the tension of the dream scene was already broken. The panther and the deer acted in unison, raising their mutual brows at the powerful ancient hag, asking what she came here for. Yaga playfully whined, disappointed to not get a flashy bloodbath, but otherwise cut to the chase and pointed at the glass-shattered chasm in the ground of Tarth's dreams.
That strange realm that smells of Zugtmoy is back again. The last time you went down there, when you fell beyond that musty-smelling mycelium web, I couldn't see very well. It was kind of fractalized. I could hear you, only you, but you couldn't hear me. I certainly could use more data on this hidden realm. Do you mind jumping down again with me?
Tarth, like a proper gentleman, without any consideration to the long-term consequences of assisting an epically evil hag, happily obliged. She crept down towards the panther, coiling around his arm with a wicked smile, clearly more comfortable among fellow predators, as she snickered and licked her lips, peering at the deer. Nonetheless, Tarth and Yaga willingly leapt into the darkness, like this was some kinda exciting school field trip, unlike the rest of the poor fucking party. And thus, the Fallen's Fellowship eventually found themselves within a supernatural darkness that swallowed all light, rendering even those with dark vision entirely blind in its clutch. A thick, suffocating presence that plucked at one's nervous systems like a tightly tuned violin. Sound became an intimate confidant, magnifying every breath and heartbeat within this damp stone chamber. Then the rustled sounds of sacks came tumbling from above, suspended by rope, a velvet bag mildly bashing against the heads of everyone in attendance, of which strangely included the rest of your cohorts that escaped Zambu with you, minus Gorham, the journalist. What brought you all together, I wonder? When pulled upon, the rope simply released, and within each velvet sack was a glass gun. Experienced with ammunition, Gribble fast calculated 2 bullets within the chamber. The last time you all were in the network, Tarth's father, Bortalamir, had cued you in on how survival works in this cursed place. But I will metagame here to let you know there is one exception to this rule, and that is this network scenario called the dealer's room. Time is in stasis here. You cannot leave until you die. But in exchange, if you didn't waste it, you leave here with the glass gun in your inventory. It only works within the network, and can automatically kill a threat, granting nothing more than a high DC dexterity save to its victims. Of course, your characters didn't have this information while trapped in this time-stopping tomb. So 9 lives and 18 bullets stood nervously waiting.
I really don't want to have to experience that kind of pain again. Why must we be back here? Please, make it stop!
Oryxian swooped the young gnome up to rest on his shoulders, while reassuringly holding her hand. Poor Cassius did not care to greet himself to potential illusions, and was too tired to justify racking his mind over this. So, not wasting much time, he decisively took his gun and blew out the back of his skull. Soon after, Lux and Gribble decided they were bored and would off themselves, but promised to try to wake their teammates up on the flip side. Little did they remember from last time, that even if this wasn't a unique scenario, it wouldn't be possible without completing their long rest. The two held hands and used their free hand to point the cold barrel towards their skulls, delivering a successful execution. The bullet that ripped through Gribble's child-framed jaw penetrated into poor Mimith, accidentally taking her out too. Nice to know a 2-for-1 is possible though. Thotham insisted that Oryxian should just either take out the sweet Tawidi or kill himself to wake her up, despite seeing that Lux and Gribble's deaths hadn't yet resulted in Tarth nor Thotham getting out of here. The men's budding squabble was interrupted by some sort of monstrosity that could be heard crawling and scraping across the floor suddenly. The creature's fast, famished feast of Cassius, Lux, and Gribble echoed with grotesque fervor. The pulling tears of flesh, accompanied by the sickening squelch and slurp, reverberated through the darkness like a dreadful parade of gluttony. The wet, primal gnashing of teeth and the guttural growls of satisfaction conspired against the growing tensions of everyone left in the room. Tawidi gasped, terrified, and then quickly the unexpected bang of a gun. Sounds of mixed scattered movement as Oryxian seethed out infuriated, demanding answers as to who just shot Tawidi dead on his fucking shoulders. Hesitance at first, but then Moravi shakily spoke up, admitting she felt the circumstances changed with the entrance of a monster. She believed the most merciful thing to do would be to put Tawidi down without her anticipating it. Oryxian cursed back, frustrated at Moravi and everyone else in the room for being so gung-ho about death when none of them knew what the long-term effects might be from dying within the network. Deafening moments passed before a guilt-racked Moravi pressed the chamber into her heart, unsure and sad if what she did was right or wrong, and put herself down. And then there were 3. Tarth taking the scenario in more like an interesting puzzle to solve, rather than a fucked-up torture chamber. But in the Harangon's defense, he's used to deeply fucked-up situations within macabre chaos. This really is just another day for the boy who was abducted and held captive by Baba Yaga and Zuktmoy. Thotham felt all over the chamber where he could. Upon listening intently, he could hear impish snarls coming from far, far above them. Tarth wasted a bullet hoping to shoot and collapse the wall. Wishful thinking. Then Thotham called to Oryxian, asking if he was going to eventually come join them and be helpful or keep being distant and difficult. Oryxian grit his teeth as he still protectively held Tawidi's limp body in his arms, determined to not let her become a meal to yet another evil beast after what happened with Fenrir, their last time in the network. Oryxian spit back at Thotham, taking back his past compliments of him, calling he and Tarth insufferable, impulsive pansies, unsure what the hell Lux and Gribble sees in either of them. As Oryxian tore into the cleric, he held Tawidi's body tighter and tighter, internally distressed at his own failure to protect her. Again. If only the men weren't trapped in darkness. Thotham might have seen and related to Oryxian's feelings. In all fairness to Thotham, he was in a distressing situation, and defaulting to logic is a dependable survival mechanism. Oryxian would typically be similar, but struggles to move past his own failures. The Game Master made some secret rolls behind the screen, which were for Oryxian. He bypassed your passive perceptions to stalk and get stealthily close. First, he went to shoot Tarth, but passed his wisdom save to resist. Remembering the Harangon's backstory, he shifted his perception of Tarth to a more sympathetic one, a ruined child, stuck in a sad man's body. Oryxian could somewhat relate to that. So, he redirected the barrel of his gun to Thotham. But once again, Oryxian passed his wisdom save to resist shooting. I guess he bitterly reasoned that pettily shooting Thotham might hurt his relationship with Lux. It was then Oryxian frustratingly reasoned he wasn't being a much better man himself. So the angsty rogue gave up, let it go, and slinked away exhausted. As Tarth and Thotham tried to throw small objects to lure out the festering creature, Oryxian decided to be secretly helpful. He cradled Tawidi in his arms, lowered himself to the ground protectively over her as best as he could, and shot himself in the socket of his missing eye, makes for a convenient precision entry point. The creature came charging for their bodies in the dark, and that was when Tarth and Thotham lunged to grapple the insatiable beast. Tarth tying it up from the front while feeling up its throat and face, and Thotham straddled the back legs and restrained the whipping tail. It was a, strangely intimate bonding session between bros and a leathery-skinned fiend, I'd say. This was thankfully a smaller pit fiend that had already been rendered semi-feeble for some reason, and could only whip and writhe around from the floor, as if someone tortured it before you all got here. Thotham and Tarth pressed their guns to the beast. Hilariously, as Thotham has never held or seen a gun up close before, he naturally had no idea how to hold or use it. Thus, Thotham ended up shooting himself in the fucking stomach, as he weakly folded over and croaked, releasing the fiend who opportunely started to thrash and break free from little Tarth's grasp. It lunged to passionately feast on Thotham. Tarth used his last bullet to try and shoot the fiend, but he fucking missed. Tarth then desperately tried feeling around for any other guns left behind. But once a person dies in the network, returning to their real bodies, all that remains is an empty husk of themselves. Hours passed as a lonely Tarth listened to the slurping of body fluids and chewing of Thotham, Eryxian, and Tawidi's bones. He eventually reasoned he might actually be stuck here for good. He darkly laughed at how he's never had to experience killing himself before. Tarth held his sickle up towards his neck while acknowledging how fucked up this is. That says a lot coming from him. And so, Tarth quickly slashed the major artery in his neck, where he fell to the cold stone ground and bled out for the fiend's final supper. Then, just like last time, the player party then collectively woke up, shouting in pain. Panlore was absolutely mortified to hear of your horrors from the network, and Lux was greatly displeased with Thotham's retellings of his argument with Eryxian. The Fallen's Fellowship otherwise successfully made it to the Condoro jungle, this mission of de-escalating a hostile prodigy wizard teenager, where Panlore's secret dungeon was found with some comical difficulty. And now, a series of puzzles awaits the party. May the odds continue to be in your favor, folks.